to Designed and Delivered for Destiny. I'm your host, Nicole. I'm a wife, author, life coach, business owner, and speaker. I was a mental health therapist for over 10 years, and now I want to bring the conversations from my office and bring it to you wherever you are. Each episode, we will discuss various topics related to your design, your deliverance, or your destiny. I'm glad you're taking time out of your busy schedule to tune in, so let's jump on in. So for today's topic, we are going to discuss, where do you draw your energy from? You know, have you ever really wanted to do something, but you just could not get yourself to focus? And I thought of this topic for today because that is actually what I was struggling with as I was writing out the script for this week. You know, I actually had a different topic in mind, which I'll likely discuss next week. But when it came time to focus, I wasn't experiencing the flow that I typically have. And you know how it is. There's just too many other things to do to continuously be delayed. You know, I personally value productivity, not that there has to be this long to-do list, but what is on the list, I actually expect to be accomplished. So when there are these times where I can't make myself do what I want to do, it's quite frustrating. And thankfully, I've learned how to prevent from spiraling into a place of defeat and powerlessness, but it's still something that I would love for you and I to conquer. So I'm wondering if you personally have ever had this issue. You know, does your brain and body always give you the energy and motivation to do the things that you need to do right when you need to do it? You know, especially without those usual energy lifters, because I forgot to mention, you know, I'm not taking my usual stimulants. So no coffee, no chai tea, no funny shows, no inspiring social media posts or Steph Curry highlights, nothing. You know, I'm taking a break from all those things. And yes, it's for spiritual reasons, but I also think it's a good idea to give our brains and our bodies a reset, right? So we never want to be physiologically or emotionally dependent on those things to function. However, what that translates into is that we have to find something that can serve as our source of motivation and source of energy naturally. So for all of you that tend to kind of wait till the last minute to do things because you just don't have the energy to get it done ahead of time, or you just, you know, you generally just procrastinate, I think this is going to be a great episode for you as well. Now, this is by no means an attempt to increase productivity so that you can just squeeze more into your day. The last thing I want to do is add more to your to-do list. In fact, I think that a lot of times we need to remove some things from our to-do list, right? But what I am desiring is that we're able to do those things that need to be done when it needs to be done, regardless of whether our mind and our body is resisting us. So can we just explore, you know, some solutions to this ever-present frustrating issue? And here's the thing, I have some recommendations which I'm not going to take credit for, but if we can apply them regularly, I believe they will help. You know, I've shared them with others over the years and I've gotten great feedback, and now I would love to share them with you as something to consider. Now, before we discuss this more, just let me rule out all the medical issues for why people can't focus or they have a lack of energy or motivation. Okay, so we're going to take a more of a general approach. As we delve into this topic, whenever we're talking about your internal state, your internal being, right? We're looking at your motivation, we're looking at your focus, we're looking at your energy. I think there are some foundational truths that have to be established, you know, and it starts with like knowing, what are you? What are you, right? Like, what are you made of? And if you didn't know, you are a spirit being who possesses a soul and lives in a physical body, right? So there are three components to what makes you who you are as a human. Now, we're going to spend most of our time talking about the soul because it's interesting. We tend to commit to and we'll embrace the importance of conditioning our physical bodies, but how much time are we spending conditioning our soul? And why is that important? Well, because your soul, which consists of your mind, your will, and emotions, that's where your drive, your motivation, the energy, that's where that follow through comes from. So our physical bodies kind of just do what our soul tells it to do. It's almost like it's a puppet and the soul is pulling the strings. So your ability to stay focused and finish those tasks, to accomplish those goals, that it's significantly tied to the condition and the submission of your soul. What do I mean when I say condition and submission? Well, we know that your soul houses your thoughts, right? So if you have a healthy mindset, let's say, you have a good work ethic, you're goal-oriented, you have a positive outlook on yourself and others, right? You believe in your abilities, there's going to be less resistance when it comes down to getting things done. Your soul basically has been conditioned to be supportive. Now, what about submission? Well, keep in mind that your soul, spirit, and body, they are not equal. So they don't come together for meetings to make decisions. There is always a hierarchy. One is going to always dominate the others. Now, we know it's not wise for us to be led by our physical bodies because it's just a body, right? It has no idea on how to lead us and ensure we're going in the right direction. You know, yes, our physical bodies can inform us and provide us with data and information to make decisions, but really the body should always be at the bottom of the decision hierarchy. So what's at the top? Well, because our spirit comes from God, it's where He resides in us. It's what He uses to communicate to us, to lead us, guide us, give us direction, wisdom. Our spirit, therefore, belongs at the top. So your spirit is like the commander of all those three parts. In fact, the Bible tells us that we are to be led by the spirit and not by the flesh. So that's what that means. And you know, our flesh, don't think of it as your physical body, but it's actually the carnal part of your soul. And we're not going to get into that too much today, but it is crucial that you are led by the spirit, because what will happen is when your spirit is in charge, there is this divine energy and strength and focus that only can come through your spirit, man. It really is our greatest resource that we're supposed to rely on every day. Now, I don't know where you are in this process of allowing your spirit to lead you. Many times your spirit can become dull or dry because it's not getting fed. And truthfully, it's not easy getting to the point where you're led by the Spirit 100% of the time. It's something I'm still working on as well. It's a journey and a process to get there, but as much as we're going to focus on the soul today, I would be remiss if I didn't emphasize that the Spirit also needs to be strengthened to do its part as your commander. Now, on the other hand, let me say for those who are more seasoned believers, I'm sure you're saying to yourself, but how is it that you've taken the time to strengthen your spirit, man, but yet you still struggle with focus, motivation, and energy? Therein lies where we now transition to the most unique part of who you are, and that is your soul. And I think this is important for us to talk about because, yes, we need to rely on the Holy Spirit to get things done, but we also have to become masters of our soul because our spirit can't control our soul. Only we can. And so if we don't find strategies to make our soul submit to what we want and ultimately to what the spirit within us wants, then we're going to have this internal dissonance, this conflict and delay within ourselves. So how do we master our soul, right? Like, what does that entail? You first have to decide to take your place as the boss and the one with the final authority, which means you're not allowing your emotions, your thoughts, and your desires to lead you and determine what you will or you won't do. You're going to have to dictate to your soul what will and will not take place instead of the other way around. Ultimately, your goal is to always make decisions based on what's best and then just find strategic ways to get it done. As a boss, you have to find ways to make your soul submit and do what you want to do instead of giving in to what it wants. Without this mindset, the strategies that we will discuss will not be as effective. Now, here's where we get into the strategies for what can help us with that energy that we need. The reason that we struggle with motivation, focus, and energy is because we lack what I would like to call soul energy. And what do I mean by soul energy? Well, what I mean is that perhaps there is something that comes from our mind, our will, and emotions that produces motivation, energy, and focus, right? The exact thing that we are looking for. Something that can be activated at will, causing your soul to do whatever it is that you want it to do. Okay, so Nicole Cherie, so what does this soul energy look like? Where does it come from? Well, it starts with your thoughts. It starts with your thoughts, it transfers to your emotions, and it's implemented by your will. For soul energy to kick in, you have to take action and then the energy will follow. More importantly, you have to eliminate energy as a requirement for you to move forward, and you have to just move. So as you take that first step and you begin to make progress, your mind will begin to assess if what you're doing is something that you want to do, if you're enjoying it, and if so, there's going to be a spike of energy released. Now, it's going to be subtle, but you're going to notice it's going to be a little bit easier to keep going. And as you're making progress, your mind is subconsciously going to start cheering you on because it's concluded that what you're doing is what you want to do, therefore it's good for you. Now, if you're loaded with stimulants, it's going to be harder for you to notice that little subtle energy release, which is important that you recognize when you're training your soul. So I always recommend fasting from stimulants during this training process. But if you got to have them, then do what you got to do. You know, it's still possible to do this work. You just have to have a high level of self-awareness. So strategy number 1, get started and then find ways to enjoy what you're doing so that your mind and emotions will react by giving you the energy and motivation to keep doing it. So what if you're not enjoying the work that you have to do? Okay, so here's the next part. When it's something that you don't want to do, intentionally focus on what you do want that is related to whatever that task is that you're doing. So perhaps by completing the task, it will result in you having the free time that you need to do some other things, right? By cleaning up that one space, it's going to help your brain to feel more relieved and focused when you're working in that particular area, right? So this is important because if in your mind you're telling yourself that I really don't want to do this, then your mind, your will, and your emotions are going to react by getting your physical body to release stress so that you will actually avoid doing that very thing. So this is what we would call mentally self-sabotaging. If instead you focus on the fact that you're doing something that you want, because ultimately it's really going to change lives. So finishing that research project, it's going to impact lives for the better. Or getting up at 5 a.m. for those early morning workouts, it's worth it because you're going to have that toner body that you want, and the list goes on. So the key is that you want your mind to view whatever it is that you're doing as something that is good and beneficial, and it will give you the soul energy to keep going. Now, I think it's important to say this. Don't expect soul energy to feel the same as the energy that comes from stimulants. If you're addicted to having those coffee highs for you to be productive, then soul energy will feel insufficient. You have to learn how to accept that you don't need high levels of energy to be productive. You really just need your will and commitment to get it done. Energy cannot become a requirement for you to move forward. So the more you train your soul and your brain to be productive, no matter the energy level, the less energy dependent you will be. Now, another step that you can take to conquer your soul and get it to obey is just to be stubborn with yourself until that resistance within you decreases. What do I mean? Well, something that I appreciate from a book that I'm reading called The Spirit Life Training by Timothy Jorgensen is it talks about the importance of telling yourself no when your soul wants to do something, right? So for example, I discovered that I had this habit of snacking when I worked. I think this developed at a young age when I was writing 20-page papers in middle school. But nevertheless, perhaps the chewing created a calming sensation which helped me to focus. But the problem is that, I wasn't always eating healthy food. So imagine taking in a lot of sugar when trying to focus. It's just not a good long-term strategy. Your energy is going to be up and down. Your brain gets addicted to sugar. All these unhealthy associations are made with a brain that says, I have to have sugar to focus. It just was not good. So to break out of that, I went the hardcore approach and just stopped snacking altogether for a period of time, which you don't have to do. Sometimes gradual is better, do what works for you. But eventually that need for me to snack in order for me to focus, it went away. So there was no longer that addiction. But what I then did is I began to occasionally reward myself with maybe popcorn when I completed the task that required more focus. So what is it that you can say no to so that you can begin begin to retrain your soul and your physical body to not depend on certain things for you to be productive. Perhaps for you, it's also snacks or caffeine. Maybe you're addicted to just that feeling of energy. Maybe it's background noise. Just take a few minutes and think about what you can say no to in order to change unhealthy patterns that are limiting your progress. Now, I also just mentioned, if you caught it, the third strategy, which is to positively reinforce change, which is to reward yourself. Soul energy increases when there is a reward attached on the other side. I tell people all the time, celebrate the small things with a reward. And how do you do this? Well, there's something that you like that you've just been kind of doing and spoiling yourself with no strings attached. So turn that thing, whatever it is that you enjoy doing on a daily, a weekly, or an occasional basis, turn it into a reward. For example, that refreshing green naked smoothie that you like to drink every day. Make that a reward for completing 50% of that one task that you have to do. Perhaps you like to shop. So when you've completed that 4-month-long project, treat yourself. And it doesn't have to be something that you always need to buy or spend money on, right? Personally, I enjoy watching, basketball and HGTV. So when I finish a task that was difficult, I reward myself with a break and watch an 8-minute recap of my team winning a game. I always recommend that your reward is in proportion to what you're doing. So after maybe spending 20 minutes updating my website and just doing some other tasks, I'm not going to spend 45 minutes watching an episode of Married to Real Estate. But if I accomplish maybe 75% of my to-dos for the day, then I'll reward myself with an episode. So the benefits to this approach is that you're making decisions mindfully and you're being intentional about even how you're going to spend and use your downtime. This really helps you to recognize that every aspect of your day is connected and your soul is always being trained for the better or for the worse. So how can you begin to reward yourself so that you can improve your soul energy? Now let's go external for a second. Exercise can be a great soul energizer. I heard someone put it this way: movement is medicine. So if you can, move around, do some walking, maybe a light jog, or if you're about that intense life, do that gladiator workout, whatever works for you. But doing some kind of movement, it lets your soul know that stagnancy is not an option. So this is one of the best ways to be productive without having to use chemical enhancements. Now, another strategy that I've found to be helpful, especially on days when my brain just doesn't want to do a lot and, I keep kind of starting and stopping, is that I will then begin to work on things that I can do physically with my hands. So by checking off my more hands-on to-dos that don't require a lot of brain energy, I then will begin to feel motivated to do the other things. So that's another strategy that you can apply so that you don't feel like you're just not doing anything. Listen, there are going to be days that you are going to just have to show yourself compassion, give yourself a free pass because you're not going to get a lot done. Don't beat yourself up. Just try not to allow that to become your norm. Keep in mind, though, as we're having this conversation, that we are talking about tasks that you will have to do this year for those various projects, for those goals that you've set for you to move forward. These are things that you've decided need to be done, or maybe it's part of your job description. So we're not talking about things that God is telling you to do. It can apply to that as well, but I do want to make that distinction, because when something comes from God, He will give you the grace, the power, the energy, the strength to do it. So if you're struggling to get things done that He has given you to do, then I want you to assess if there is something blocking you from receiving all that He has released to you, because His grace is sufficient, and what He has released is only going to be as impactful as the quality of the vessel He has released it to. So let's just say, for example, you have an addiction to sugar. Your brain's going to be unstable, causing your cognitive ability to be negatively impacted. So no matter how much power and energy and strength that God has given you, it's always going to be filtered through your physical body. Well, if it's unhealthy, then its impact is going to be limited. Let me take a second to address a few things to be watchful of when you're struggling to get things done. There are these three voices that will produce ideas, aka thoughts, which can cause you to spiral, give up, or delay. And that is the voice of powerlessness, the voice of defeat, and anxiety. So these are all voices that will attempt to get you to give in, to feel like, you're not going to be able to get these things done. It wants you to feel guilty for not completing the task. It wants you to think that what you're dreaming of is not for you. You're not capable. Just remember that thoughts are ideas, and you have to take a stand in your authority no matter how much energy you don't have. Take these thoughts captive. Sometimes ignoring them can work, but often you're going to have to take those thoughts and compare them to the truth, which then will cause them to back down. All right, so part of maintaining your soul energy is managing your thoughts. Listen, I believe that when we come off of autopilot and take back our authority over our soul and put it in submission to our spirit, our overall well-being will improve. Our effectiveness, efficiency, our mental and physical health, our ability to enjoy life, to, embrace the unknown and live life on purpose instead of just because we're here. All of that improves. So let's not allow ourselves to stay on autopilot, remain in the same place, and keep repeating the same cycles and patterns. Last thing is that I hope you realize that your soul is very powerful. Your soul, it's a transporter, it's a producer, it's a receiver, a communicator. Basically, it's the chief operating officer within you. Of course, your spirit is the CEO and your physical body is an employee. So the best thing to do is to ensure that the hierarchy is always in its proper order, because your soul is powerful. It has the ability to enhance and follow what your spirit is leading you to do, or it can go rogue and just do its own thing. But when your spirit and soul are aligned, everything just flows for you. There's this natural energy and synergy that you feel. Everything is just easier. When your soul goes rogue, that's when you start to have a problem, because your soul may be driving you away from what your spirit wants, or there may be something blocking your soul from receiving what your spirit wants you to receive. The greatest thing you can do is to be sure that your spirit and soul are in alignment. So tap into that soul energy. Start to take charge over that most influential part of who you are, and that is your soul. Alrighty, you know what time it is. This is the time where we discuss a phrase, pattern, or belief that has been a hindrance to many in the culture. And if we eradicate it, it would improve your life, your family, and the community. It's chain breaking time. The behavior pattern that we are addressing this week is putting people on blast, aka exposing people's sins and shortcomings. When did the church turn into the Jerry Springer show? I thought love covers a multitude of sins, not exposes the brethren for them to be condemned by the world and the church. I thought that a righteous man falls 7 times, right? Not a non-believer, but a righteous person. So why are we entertaining those who choose to capitalize off of sin and negativity instead of praying for those who have fallen, or maybe that appears that they've fallen? You do know that being a false witness is an abomination to the Lord. And so when you are saying or repeating things that you did not witness with your own eyes, you have become a false witness. Yes, people need to be held accountable, but what's the point in us being set apart so that we can become a light to the world if we do things the same as the world does it? We have our own accountability process. We have all fallen short. We are all in need of a Savior. We are all being sanctified day by day, and we're depending on God's grace and mercy. So let's never celebrate, entertain, or promote the plans of the enemy to tear down the church from within through drama. Let me give you a final word of encouragement. Continue to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will, trust me, he will direct your path. Make it a commitment to do every day with God and trust that he will help you along the way. Make it his will and not your own, and let that be your model. And I believe you will see great and mighty things happen for you this year. Until next time, shalom.